today. First, as you saw this morning, the Saudis will open their airspace to all civilian carriers. That is a big deal, Not only symbolically, but substantively, it's a big deal. It means Saudi airspace is now open to flights to and from Israel. This is the first tangible step on the path of what I hope will eventually be a broader normalization of relations. Second, we concluded a historic deal that to transform a flashpoint at the heart of the Middle East wars into an area of peace. International peacekeepers, including U.S. troops, will leave Tiran Island in the Red Sea, where they've been for over 40 years, since the Camp David Accords. 5 American soldiers died on this strategically located island in 2020, and it's important to remember them today. Now, thanks to this breakthrough, this island will be open to tourism and economic development while retaining all necessary security arrangements and the present freedom of navigation of all parties, including Israel. Third, we agreed to work together to deepen and extend the Yemen ceasefire. And you know there's carnage been in Yemen of late. And it's been in place more than 3 months, resulting in the most peaceful period in Yemen in 7 years. We further agreed to pursue a diplomatic process to achieve a wider settlement in Yemen. The Saudi leadership also committed to continue to facilitate the delivery of food and humanitarian goods to civilians. In this context, we discussed Saudi Arabia's security needs to defend the kingdom, given very real threats from Iran and Iran's proxies. Fourth, we concluded several new arrangements to better position our nations for the coming decades. Saudi Arabia will invest in new U.S.-led technology to develop and secure reliable 5G and 6G networks, both here and in the future in developing countries, to coordinate with the Partnership for Global Initiative, the global infrastructure and investment, which I put together at the G7. This new technology solution for 5G, called Open RAN, will outcompete other platforms, including from China. Saudi Arabia will also partner with us on a far-reaching clean energy initiative focused on green hydrogen, solar, carbon capture, nuclear, and other projects to accelerate the world's clean energy transition and to help the U.S. clean energy industry set global standards. And fifth, we had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth. And that will begin shortly. I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis share that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks. Finally, we discussed human rights and the need for political reform. As always, as I always do, I made clear that the topic is vitally important to me and to the United States. With respect to the murder of Khashoggi, I raised it at the top of the meeting, making it clear what I thought of it at the time and what I think of it now. And it was I was straightforward and direct in discussing it. I made my view crystal clear. I said very straightforwardly, for an American president to be silent on an issue of human rights, is this inconsistent with who we are and who I am? I'll always stand up for our values. So that's a quick summary of tonight's outcomes. Tomorrow, with 9 leaders from around the region, we'll have more. One thing we will discuss is the multi-billion-dollar commitment of the GCC to invest in the Partnership for Global Infrastructure Investment, which I announced at the G7 last month, to help address infrastructure needs of low- and middle-income countries who don't have the wherewithal to borrow the funds to meet the needs of their people. And after years of failed efforts, we have now finalized an agreement to connect Iraq's electric grid to the GCC grids through Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, and deepening Iraq's integration into the region and reducing its dependence on Iran. And it was pointed out to me that I was reminded by staff at the time at the meeting that I tried to do that back when I was the early days of my vice presidency. Finally, it's done, being done. Tomorrow, I'll also be laying out an affirmative framework for America's engagement in the Middle East to build on these important steps going forward. The bottom line is this trip is about, once again, positioning America in this region for the future, We are not going to leave a vacuum in the Middle East for Russia or China to fill, and we're getting results. I'll take a couple questions now.
What was the Crown Prince's response to your comments about Khashoggi?
He basically said that he was not personally responsible for it. I indicated I thought he was. He said he was not personally responsible for it, and he took action against those who were responsible. And then I went on to talk more about how that dealing with any opposition to or criticism of the Saudi administration in other countries was viewed as, to me, a violation of human rights.
Mr. President, sir, two quick questions, if I may. First, we just heard from Jamal Khashoggi's wife, who said after this visit, the blood of MBS's next victim is on your hands. What do you say to Mrs. Khashoggi?
I'm sorry she feels that way. I was straightforward back then. I was straightforward today. This is a meeting, I didn't come here to meet with the Crown Prince. I came here to meet with the GCC and 9 nations to deal with the security and the needs of the free world, and particularly the United States, and not leave a vacuum here, which was happening as it has in other parts of the world.
On gas prices, if I may, you said that we'll see relief at some point in the not-too-distant future. What is the message to Americans who are looking for that relief now? When should they expect to see a real change in prices, though they've already been coming down?
Change.
They've already been coming down.
That's right. They've been coming down every single day, to the best of my knowledge.
When will we see the impact of this visit?
I suspect you won't see that for another couple weeks. And we'll see more when we see gas stations start to lower their price consistent with what they're paying for the oil.
Mr. President, do you regret calling the Saudis a pariah?
I don't regret anything I said.
Did
Do you still feel that way, though, Mr. President?
I just answered your question. Do I regret it? I don't regret anything that I said. What happened to Khashoggi was outrageous.
Mr. President?
Yes.
You're coming under a lot of fire for your fist bump with the Crown Prince. I just want to give you a chance to respond to that. But also, how can you be sure that another incident, another murder like Jamal Khashoggi's won't happen again?
Well, God love you. What a silly question. How could I possibly be sure of any of that? I just made it clear. If anything occurs like that again, they'll get that response and much more. Look, you've heard me say before, when I criticized Xi Jinping for slave labor and what they're doing in the western mountains of China, and he said I had no right to criticize China, and I said, look, I am President of the United States of America. For the United States President to remain silent on a clear violation of human rights is totally inconsistent with who we are, and what we would do, what we believe. And so I'm not going to remain silent. Can I predict anything is going to happen? Let alone here, let alone any other part of the world? No. But I don't know why you're all so surprised the way I react. No one's ever wondered that I mean what I say. The question is I sometimes say all that I mean.
And what about your response to the fist bump?
On the issue of climate, Joe Manchin obviously made significant news right now, which appears to be torpedoing what was one of your biggest priorities as it relates to energy and to climate back at home. Your message to those Americans right now who are looking for that relief that would have a wide impact as it affects the climate and energy specifically.
I am not going away. I'm going to use every power I have as president to continue to fulfill my pledge to move toward dealing with global warming. Thank you very
Mr.
much.
President, is Joe Manchin negotiating in good faith?
I didn't negotiate with Joe Manchin. I have no idea.
Thanks, guys.
And there you have it. That was President Biden speaking after his nearly 3-hour meeting with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He says he met with the family and discussed a variety of issues, everything from gas prices to the murder of Jamal Khashoggi.
Let's bring in CBS News senior White House correspondent and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe, who is in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Hey, Ed. A question here. Your reaction to the president's remarks just moments ago.
Well, he clarified why he's here, I think, in pretty clear terms, saying that this is not just about raising two urgent domestic concerns, gas prices and human rights, but also a host of other regional concerns. He ticked off a series of things that his administration's been working on, including getting allowing for flights from Israel to come to Saudi Arabia as the two countries work on normalizing relations, making some changes in U.S.-Saudi military cooperation, some other changes regarding technology and national security concerns that are of importance to countries in this region, certainly important to the Saudis. But you heard him say critically there that at the top of the meeting with the Crown Prince, he raised the issue of the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, that Washington Post columnist who was dismembered, the CIA says, at the request, the order of the Crown Prince back in 2018, making clear, as the president has said repeatedly for several weeks now, that he would raise human rights concerns with the Saudis and that his position on this was well known. And also said that they had broader conversations about what he called energy security, what most Americans would call pain at the pump or gas prices, saying and signaling that in the coming weeks, OPEC Plus, the global oil-producing organization that Saudi Arabia leads, is expected to hold conversations in August about oil production levels. Essentially, they're laying out pretty clearly what the about 3 hours of conversations he had with the king, with the crown prince, and with other Saudi officials was all about. I want to call out something that happened right as he showed up for this meeting that's already ricocheting across social media and television screens around the world. The meeting began with the president arriving and being greeted by the crown prince himself, who came outside and fist bumped with the president. That image there, which is only available to Saudi host television and Saudi social media accounts, U.S. reporters were not there to witness it, has been denounced now by a handful of organizations. Jamal Khashoggi's fiancée took a Photoshop tweet and said this is probably what he would say, in essence criticizing it, saying this is the result of my death. Congressman Adam Schiff of California, member of the Intelligence Committee, tweeted a little while ago, if we ever needed a visual reminder of the continuing grip oil-rich autocrats have on U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, we got it today. One fist bump is worth 1,000 words. Critically, the Washington Post, its publisher Fred Ryan, in a statement saying the fist bump between President Biden and Mohammed bin Salman was worse than a handshake. It was shameful. It projected a level of intimacy and comfort that delivers to NBS the unwarranted redemption he has been desperately seeking. That, plus the meeting they had, certainly does some of that. But the president saying he had no choice but to come to Saudi Arabia, a critical country in geopolitical and economic affairs around the world, and part of his bid to ensure that the United States maintains supremacy and relevancy in this part of the world, lest China or Russia fill the vacuum.
Ed, I want to ask you about the Saudi minister you spoke with who was at the meeting with President Biden and what insight you got from that. But quickly, can you also address how does a fist bump like that happen? Is it something that is agreed upon beforehand? We were discussing that because obviously this is causing a lot of consternation for President Biden and his team. What happened there? Was he taken by surprise?
We were taken by surprise because we weren't anticipating that he would be greeted by the Crown Prince, and we didn't know how that first face-to-face encounter would go. Remember, when he arrived in Israel the other day, Israeli officials extended their hands for shakes, and he gave them bumps instead. The White House, through Israeli media, had signaled that Israeli officials had been told they would only be getting fist bumps officially from him in order to ward off the threat of COVID. But pretty quickly it was evident that part of what the president was likely trying to do here was preempt a warm embrace and handshake from the Crown Prince by instead just giving out the more jocular fist bump. He did that for about 5 minutes in Israel before he started shaking hands and talking to people pretty intimately, and it was pretty clear that that plan of fist bumping was going to fall apart. But you saw here today, what happened. And look, people are going to sit there and say, why on earth do you care about this? Why are you spending so much time talking about it? It's because those enduring images of an American president greeting him like this after the world, or elements of the world, have questioned his human rights record, whether he's prepared and capable to lead this key kingdom, gives him legitimacy on the global stage, especially with any young Saudi or person here in the Arab world who has a phone and access to social media and will see that the future leader of this country is, buddy-buddy with the American president. But we did speak with Adel Abjabir. He is the Saudi Minister of State for Foreign Affairs. We spoke with him just a little while ago here in Jeddah to get the Saudi side of the story from these meetings. He confirmed it was about 3 hours long, that it covered the issues the president mentioned. We asked him 2 critical questions. Did they talk about Jamal Khashoggi, and did they talk about high gas prices? Take a look.
Saudi Arabia has always been committed to seeking stability in the oil markets by ensuring that there is adequate supply. And we have done this for the past number of decades, so our record is very clear. We work within OPEC and within OPEC Plus to ensure that the markets are balanced. Now, from time to time, you have deviations in terms of the market or erratic behavior that is a result of geopolitics or a result of I don't know, news or things, rumors or things of that nature. But in terms of the fundamentals of supply demand, we always seek to ensure that the markets are adequately supplied. Over the past 9 or 10 months, Saudi Arabia has increased its oil production substantially in order to bring enough supplies to the market. We looked at the future supply situation, and we announced in June that we would accelerate it so that they happen in July and August rather than into the fall. And we keep reviewing this situation, and we make sure that the markets are in balance so that we don't have shortages. I know that there are concerns in the United States about high gasoline prices. But high gasoline prices are really a function of many, many things. One is the fact that America has a shortage of refining capacity. No refinery has been built in decades. And so even if you bring more oil to the market, if it cannot be refined into gasoline, it will not lead to a drop of prices at the pump. You have issues with regards to the different blends and standards of gasoline that exist in the United States that complicate the ability to import different gasoline into the United States for American gasoline marketeers, so to speak. And so there are a number of issues that have to do with regulatory issues. There are issues that have to do with refining shortages. Where it comes to supply and demand of crude oil, as I mentioned earlier, we have worked assiduously, and we will continue to ensure that there is enough supply.
Did President Biden raise the murder of Jamal Khashoggi?
President Biden mentioned that this issue is a concern to people in the U.S., especially in the U.S. Congress, and he also mentioned that he took Saudi Arabia's views with regards to this issue at face value. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince explained to him that this was a tragic mistake and it was very painful for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and that Saudi Arabia investigated this issue, charged individuals responsible for it, and that a number of them have been convicted and are currently serving jail sentences. So basically, we investigated, we punished those responsible, and we put in place procedures to ensure that a tragedy like this cannot happen again, which is exactly what other countries do. The United States did it after the Abu Ghraib situation in Iraq, and the United States does it when mistakes happen. And so that was it.
The Crown Prince himself, though, did not take blame for the murder.
The Crown Prince stated several years back that as the person responsible for overseeing the Saudi security services, that ultimately he's responsible for it. But the charges that the Crown Prince knew about it, or much less ordered it, are ridiculous.
So as you see there, the Saudi State Minister of Foreign Affairs, Adel al-Jubeir, confirming what the president just said, that in fact the fate of Jamal Khashoggi did come up in the meeting explicitly. You hear there the Crown Prince taking responsibility for the government's actions, but not directly for ordering the killing, and it's something he had said previously, and explaining that it looks like in the coming weeks there will be broader discussions among members of OPEC about bringing down or by boosting oil production, and that they're sensitive to the fact that Americans and customers all over the world are concerned about the rise of gas prices. We should point out, as the president did a few moments ago, that gas prices on average have been falling for the last several weeks now, still north of $4, but nowhere near the $5 they were at just a little while ago.
And Ed, on the way out, the president also discussed the budget and the recent comments by Senator Joe Manchin. And the president, I think, made a remark along the lines of he didn't negotiate with Manchin.
He didn't. This has been a conversation that's been ongoing between Senate Democrats, because they were going to use a gimmick in Senate procedure that allows them to pass legislation with just the votes of the majority party. So it would have to be all 50 Democrats plus the vice president. Manchin, who scuttled the infamous Build Back Better plan last year for a variety of reasons, was talking to Senate Democratic leadership about a smaller plan that would have involved implementing the president's climate change agenda, some changes in health care policy, and paying for it by raising taxes on the wealthy. Overnight, Manchin announced that he could no longer support that and instead is focused on offering some relief to people for prescription drug prices and extending elements of the Affordable Care Act. That's not what a majority of Democrats want to do. In essence, Joe Manchin once again has pulled the football away from Charlie Brown, members of his own party, and the president. But you saw the president there say, at least on camera, that he hasn't been negotiating with the senator, which is true. And in a statement, he said, if the Senate will not move to tackle the climate crisis and strengthen our domestic clean energy industry, he'll take strong executive action to do it himself. So the Joe versus Joe follies continue.
Ed O'Keefe, powerful interview. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Ed.
And Russian forces are once again unleashing brutal assaults on Ukrainian cities. The latest happening this morning in Mykolaiv.
Rescue teams in the southern Ukrainian city are searching for survivors after being hit by 10 strikes. Ukrainian officials say they were aimed at 2 universities and infrastructure facilities. This comes as Ukrainian officials accuse Russia of intentionally attacking civilians in Thursday's brutal attack in central Ukraine.
At least 23 people were killed when a missile hit near a residential building in Vinnytsia. An office building